Some truths are too strange to make the textbooks. They're tucked into the folds of history, whispered between the footnotes, familiar things with unfamiliar origins. These aren't dark or tragic, just curious little facts that shift the way you see the world. Here are 20 disturbing but oddly delightful truths you probably weren't taught in school. People used to bathe once a year, if that. They didn't stink because they were lazy. They stank because they were terrified. For a good stretch of European history, stepping into a bath was thought to open your pores to sickness. Not just a sniffle, but a full-on plague invite. So people avoided bathing the way we avoid replying to group texts. Once a year, maybe for a festival or a royal wedding, they'd rinse off. The rest of the time, linen. Lots of linen. They believed putting on a clean linen shirt would absorb dirt and oil from the skin. Some folks changed shirts several times a week and thought, well, that's taken care of. And no, it didn't smell taken care of. Visitors often noted that even the nobility had a bit of a cloud about them. But you wouldn't say anything. That would be rude. Besides, it wasn't just one person, it was everyone. You were nose blind by dinner. Ancient Romans used urine as mouthwash. The Romans gave us roads, aqueducts, and the idea of the Senate. But they also gargled with urine. Not just any urine, preferably aged urine, because you see, aged urine develops ammonia and ammonia cleans things. So while you're brushing your teeth with minty foam and fluoride, the average Roman might have been swirling vintage number 1 like a fine mouthwash. And yes, they were proud of it. In fact, Rome had public urine collection pots on street corners. You could just drop off your donation or someone else's. And it wasn't just for dental hygiene. Fullers, basically Roman dry cleaners, used it to clean togas. So if your breath didn't reek of urea, your outfit might. This wasn't a fringe thing. Even emperors taxed the urine trade, which means somewhere in ancient Rome there was a man with a ledger saying, "You owe 3 denarii for your urine." History. It's not always clean, but it sure is resourceful. You don't really remember things. You remember the last time you remembered them. Your brain is like a very confident, slightly unreliable friend. Every time you remember something, a birthday party, a breakup, that one time you nailed the perfect comeback in the shower, it's not like playing back a recording. It's more like repainting a mural from memory. With each retelling, you add a brushstroke, a detail, a little spice. Over time, your memory drifts from what happened to what you think happened to what your cousin told you they think happened. Scientists call this reconsolidation, which is a fancy way of saying, oops, that might not be true. So when your friend swears you never said thank you for the airport pickup, and you know you did, well, maybe you're both wrong. Memory isn't a vault, it's a chalkboard in the rain. But don't worry, you're still you, even if the story about that high school talent show gets more impressive every time you tell it. High heels were invented for men. Long before stilettos strutted down runways, heels were worn by soldiers, Persian warriors to be exact. The heel helped them stay locked into stirrups during horseback archery. Practical, rugged, very masculine cowboy boot energy. Then Europe caught wind of the look, and aristocrats, always looking for a new way to show off, said, "I want those, but like red." Soon, men of status were tottering around Versailles in heeled shoes so high they could barely walk. The higher the heel, the higher the rank. Louis XIV even had exclusive red heels or royal flex centuries before Louboutins. Eventually, women adopted the trend and men quietly stepped away, which makes it all the funnier today when people insist heels are for women. They were never about gender, they were about power and stirrups, and occasionally falling down a marble staircase with dignity. Left-handed people were once forced to write right-handed. Imagine being 5 years old, holding your crayon in your left hand, and having a teacher snatch it away like it's a cursed object. For centuries, left-handedness was seen as suspicious. The Latin word sinistra, yep, that's where we get the word sinister, literally meant left. So if you were left-handed, people assumed you were a little off. In schools, teachers train kids to switch hands, sometimes with rulers, sometimes with shame. The goal? Conformity and neat penmanship. Never mind that lefties were often more creative or ambidextrous, they were told to fix it. The irony? Some of history's most brilliant minds were left-handed. Leonardo da Vinci, Marie Curie, and that one person in your office who still writes cursive in meetings. Left-handers make up about 10% of the population, which is just enough to stay mysterious, but not enough to get left-handed scissors in every drawer. Justice for lefties. The QWERTY keyboard was designed to slow you down. The keyboard you're probably using right now, it was never meant to help you type faster. In fact, it was specifically designed to slow you down. Back in the 1870s, early typewriters had a problem. If you typed too quickly, the metal arms would jam and tangle. So, Christopher Sholes, the man behind the QWERTY layout, rearranged the keys, not for speed, but for spacing. He made common letter pairings harder to reach so people would type more slowly, and somehow we stuck with it, even after the jam-prone machines were long gone. There are faster layouts, but QWERTY had the head start, and we all know how hard it is to relearn anything after age 11. So here we are, still dancing around the alphabet, slowed down on purpose and by design. It's like the traffic circle of typing, confusing, outdated, but oddly charming. Victorians had secret flirting codes using fans and parasols. If you think texting is confusing, just wait until you hear about Victorian flirting. In an age where public affection was frowned upon, and even eye contact could start a rumor, people got creative. Enter the language of fans and parasols. Holding a closed fan in your left hand, that meant I'm taken. Touching your cheek with it, I like you. Twirling it in your right hand, never speak to me again. Parasols had their own signals too. Tilted over your right shoulder, follow me. Left shoulder, let's just be friends. Imagine going on a date and accidentally sending someone mixed messages just by swatting a fly. You think autocorrect ruins relationships? Try misinterpreting a fluttering fan and walking across a ballroom only to be met with a glare and a closed parasol. Still, you have to respect the drama. It was basically emoji theater, but with better costumes. Before alarm clocks, people paid knocker-ups. Before phones, before bedside clocks, before that one awful alarm sound we all hate but refuse to change, there were knocker-ups. Real people whose job was to make sure you woke up on time. In industrial era Britain and Ireland, Folks paid these human alarm clocks to tap on their windows in the morning, sometimes with a long stick, sometimes with a pebble, sometimes with a pea shooter. Yes, a little tube with dry peas. Time to work, Mr. Higgins. Some knocker-ups even carried ladders for clients with upper story windows. And the wildest part, some of them had to stay up all night to make sure you didn't oversleep. No snooze button, no backup alarm, just a stranger outside your house with a stick and a deep sense of duty. Honestly, feels more trustworthy than my iPhone. Your tongue doesn't have taste zones. You've probably seen the diagram. Sweet in the front, salty on the sides, bitter in the back, sour somewhere in between. A tidy little map of your tongue, and completely made up. The whole taste zone thing comes from a mistranslation of a German paper in the 1900s. A scientist noticed that different parts of the tongue had slightly different sensitivity to taste, and somehow this turned into you can't taste sweet unless it hits the tip of your tongue, which is not true. Your taste buds are more democratic than that. Every region of your tongue can detect all 5 basic tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. So no matter where the chocolate hits, you're good. The truth is our tongues are more adaptable than we give them credit for. And now you can smugly correct someone at a dinner party, or better yet, don't. Just enjoy your meal and quietly know you have superior oral science. Pineapples were once rented as luxury decor. There was a time when a single pineapple could cost as much as a horse. Not a racehorse, just a regular, dependable clomp-clomp horse. In 18th century Europe, pineapples were exotic, difficult to grow, and wildly expensive. So expensive, in fact, that most people didn't buy them to eat. They rented them. You'd pay a fee to borrow a pineapple for your dinner party, display it proudly as a centerpiece, and then return it uneaten to the pineapple dealer. That's right, pineapple dealers were a thing. And if you did buy one to eat, that was next level wealth. Displaying a pineapple was basically saying, I have money and taste, and also a weird fruit sitting in the middle of my table like a tropical trophy. Sometimes the pineapple got rented out so many times it was completely rotten by the time anyone actually sliced it. Pineapples also became a motif of hospitality, which is why you see them carved into bedposts, gates, or engraved on antique silver. So yes, in the past, pineapples were the Birkin bag of fruit, rarely used, wildly expensive, and mostly there to say, look what I can afford, but won't consume. Ancient Egyptians had DIY pregnancy tests. Long before over-the-counter test strips and tiny plus signs, there was wheat and barley. Ancient Egyptians around 1350 BCE had a method to detect pregnancy using seeds and urine. Here's how it worked. A woman would urinate on 2 separate piles, one of wheat, one of barley. If either pile sprouted, it was considered a sign she was pregnant. If barley sprouted first, it was believed she was having a boy. If wheat sprouted first, a girl. If nothing sprouted, not pregnant, or possibly just dehydrated. Modern science actually tested this method in the 1960s and found it worked about 70% of the time, which, let's be honest, is better than some phone apps. And no weird symbols or blinking hourglasses, just seeds, sunshine, and patience. A truly ancient version of congratulations, maybe. Maps used to be filled with dragons. Today, maps are tidy. Borders, roads, satellite views, zoom in, zoom out, maybe a coffee shop or two. But in the Middle Ages, you might find dragons. or sea monsters or giants or suspiciously angry mermaids. When early cartographers reached the edge of known territory, they didn't just leave it blank, they filled it with imagination. The phrase, "Here be dragons," wasn't just poetic, it was cartographic caution. It basically meant, no one's been here, we don't know what's going on, good luck. Some maps had full illustrations of serpents wrapped around ships or giant birds snatching sailors mid-voyage. Were these literal warnings? Maybe. Or maybe they were just really good excuses for not updating your data. Why didn't we map the northern coast? Oh, dragons. Effective, terrifying, and way more exciting than Google Earth. The Eiffel Tower can grow over 6 inches taller in summer. You probably think of the Eiffel Tower as a sturdy, unchanging landmark, still stoic, dependable. But in the summer, it gets a little taller. Due to thermal expansion, the iron in the tower stretches when it heats up. On a hot day, it can grow by more than 6 inches, which means technically it's one of the few buildings that wears shorter pants in the winter. The heat also makes the top of the tower lean slightly away from the sun. So if you ever feel like it's looking down on you, it might just be trying to get some shade. Engineers account for this. The structure was designed with flexibility in mind, because nothing says French elegance like a 10,000-ton sunbather doing a gentle stretch. Even the Eiffel Tower has a summer mode. Some ice cream flavors were once savory. These days, ice cream means sweet things: vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, maybe something trendy like salted caramel or honey lavender. But in colonial America, ice cream flavors weren't always dessert friendly. Popular varieties included asparagus, parmesan, and brace yourself, oyster. Yes, oyster ice cream. Creamy, briny, vaguely unsettling. Imagine a scoop of that on your birthday cake. Back then, ice cream was more of a novelty food than a treat. Wealthy households experimented with ingredients the way modern food trucks do. Some even believed cold food could balance the humors, which sounds scientific until you realize the humors were basically mood fluids. Anyway, next time your local shop runs out of Rocky Road, just be grateful they're not serving up shellfish swirl. The past was bold and weird, and definitely not dairy-free. Romans cleaned dishes with crushed bones and ash. Long before dish soap came in lemon-scented bottles with ergonomic grips, the Romans had bones and ash, sometimes mixed with a little sand for texture. To clean dishes, Romans would scrub their cookware with a gritty paste made from crushed animal bones, wood ash, and occasionally a splash of vinegar. It worked technically. Ash contains lye, which can break down grease. But you have to admire the optimism of someone scrubbing last night's lentils with the remains of last month's goat. If the dish still had a bit of soot or marrow on it, that was just flavor. Bonus points if you could tell which animal it was by the aftertaste. Cleanliness may be next to godliness, but in ancient Rome, it was also next to the bone pile. Ancient Greeks brushed their teeth with powdered charcoal. Dental hygiene in the ancient world was ambitious. The Greeks cared about their smiles, but they didn't have minty toothpaste or ultrasonic brushes, so they used what they had: powdered charcoal, crushed bones, burnt hooves, oyster shells. Basically, whatever was gritty, chalky, or vaguely unpleasant, they'd mix it into powder, rub it on their teeth with a cloth or frayed stick, and call it a day. It did clean the teeth, sort of, but it was also extremely abrasive. Think of it like exfoliating your face with a cheese grater. Over time, it would wear down enamel and leave your teeth looking more ancient than heroic. But hey, no plaque, just personality, and possibly calcium dust in your morning wine. Marie Antoinette never said, "Let them eat cake." It's the most famous quote she never said. Let them eat cake. Cold, unfeeling, the ultimate rich girl mic drop. Except there's no actual proof Marie Antoinette ever said it. The phrase first appeared in a book by philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau when Marie was just 9 years old and not even in France yet. Oops. It likely referred to brioche, a rich bread, not cake, but even that was symbolic, not literal. Historians believe the quote was attributed to her later to fire up the revolution, basically an 18th century smear campaign. If it happened today, she'd be trending on Twitter with a sarcastic hashtag and zero context. Marie Antoinette is over, hashtag CakeGate. So no, she didn't dismiss starving peasants with a dessert suggestion, but she did have terrible PR. In the 1800s, ketchup was sold as medicine. Once upon a time, ketchup wasn't just a fry's best friend, it was a cure. In the 1830s, an Ohio physician named Dr. John Cook Bennett claimed that tomato ketchup, then called tomato extract, could treat diarrhea, indigestion, and jaundice. He wasn't just spooning it out either. He turned it into ketchup pills, sold them, promoted them, wrote articles about their benefits, and for a while, people were genuinely taking tomato tablets like multivitamins. Feeling a little off? Have a ketchup. The fad eventually fizzled when other so-called ketchup doctors jumped in and, surprise, made fake versions that didn't work. But the legacy lived on. So the next time someone judges you for putting ketchup on eggs, just tell them, "It's for my digestion." Totally historical. Vikings didn't wear horn helmets. If you picture a Viking, odds are he's got a beard, an axe, and, of course, horns on his helmet. Big, curvy, cartoonish horns, except they never wore those. No archaeological evidence has ever turned up a Viking helmet with horns. Real Viking helmets were practical, rounded, often made of iron or leather, and horn-free. Because horns in battle? Terrible idea. Imagine trying to duck through a doorway or wear a hood without accidentally impaling your travel buddy. So where did the horn myth come from? The 1800s. Romantic artists and costume designers started adding horns for dramatic flair, especially in opera where subtlety goes to die. It stuck. And now we have centuries of Halloween costumes, football mascots, and novelty mugs based on set design. Vikings may not have had horns, but they definitely had branding, just not the kind you can hang coats on. In the 1920s, people thought tomatoes were poisonous. It's hard to imagine a world without tomato sauce, or ketchup, or salsa, or even humble BLT. But for a surprisingly long time, tomatoes were considered dangerous. In colonial America and parts of Europe, people thought tomatoes were poisonous, and not without reason. Tomatoes are part of the nightshade family, which includes some legitimately toxic plants. But the real confusion came from wealthy people eating tomatoes off pewter plates. The acidity in the tomatoes would leach lead from the plates. People got sick, and they blamed the tomatoes, not the lead-based dinnerware. So for decades, tomatoes were called poison apples. It wasn't until the 1800s that people warmed up to them, and by the 1920s, they were finally cleared of all charges. So yes, there was a time when putting a slice of tomato on your sandwich was considered reckless behavior. Culinary courage in every bite. The past is full of small surprises, flavors we've forgotten, customs we've outgrown, and stories that never made it to the front of the lecture hall. But that's what makes them fun to find. Thanks for wandering through the weird with me. I'll see you next time.